my next tale hails from somewhat of the same genre as the last one. It comes, as I learned in my travels, from a great island in the North Atlantic called Iceland. A very odd island, fire at one end, ice at the other, and surrounded by great dark oceans. And the people who live there are very strong, but stoic, very stoic. And this is an old story that they tell called Hilda the Elf Queen. Now up in the mountains was a farmer who had a small farm and a family that helped him with the farm. His wife unfortunately had passed relatively recently, but while she was still ill but still physically capable and mentally capable, she had brought into the farm a woman named Hilda to help with the farm, with the woman's chores. And Hilda had agreed to stay on even when the wife had passed, to continue to be basically the wife, but she did not share the bed of the farmer. They were two good people, and they were not married, so they did not share the bed. And the farmer continued with his life, and winter started to set in, and it came close to Christmas. Now, traditionally, at his farm, in the fall and the early winter, he would hire a shepherd to overlook his flocks over the winter. However, an odd thing had been happening recently, the last 2 years specifically, that on Christmas Eve, the shepherd who stayed with the sheep on Christmas Eve and did not go to church was found the next morning gibbering a language that nobody understood, with hands and knees and feet like he'd been out running in the rocks and the lava all night long. And so the farmer had decided that he would not hire a shepherd anymore because he did not think it was fair, whatever curse was upon his farm, to have it laid upon these young men that he hired to be shepherds. But a young man turned up and said, I understand that you need a shepherd for the winter. And he said, I can't hire you. Awful things happen to the shepherds on my farm. The young man said, I think I'm young and strong and bold, and if you will let me stay on your farm, I will be happy. The farmer had to agree that he needed a shepherd. He couldn't do it all, so he hired the young man to stay. So Christmas Eve came, and the rest of the family got up, packed up, and started heading off. Now Hilda stayed at the farm on Christmas Eve. The farmer had a thought that she might still believe in some of the old ways, and he wasn't a priest, so he wasn't going to push it. But if she wanted to stay on the farm on Christmas Eve, that was her right. So he and the rest of the family went off. The shepherd was asleep in his little enclosure, and the shepherd had a thought that maybe he should stay awake, but pretend to be asleep. And so he did. He lay all cuddled up under his blankets, and soon he heard a noise. And he sort of peered out and realized it was Hilda tiptoeing into his room. And she held something in her hand. And soon she was putting what he realized was a bridle into his mouth. And he felt strangely compelled to follow her. She realized it must be a magic bridle of some sort. And she took him outside, and she climbed up on his shoulders and gave him the command to go. And she rode him off across the fields till they soon reached a fissure in the earth, which Iceland has many of. And she dismounted, and she tied him to a rock, and she descended into the fissure. Well, the fissure had warm air coming out, but he had to know what was going on. So he worked, and he finally got the bridle out of his mouth, and he descended the fissure himself. And he got down there, and he realized he was in another world. For there was grass, green grass, a warm sun, and he could see Hilda ahead of him. Well, he realized that it was a big open field, and if she turned around, she might be able to see him. Well, he had a magic pebble in his pocket, and he took it out, and he held it in his hand, and he became invisible. Very handy for shepherds. And so he followed her, and soon he saw a great palace on the horizon, with many people gathered around outside. And as Hilda approached, they ran forward, and they greeted her, and they shook her hand, and they hugged her, and they clapped her on the back, both men and women, and the children were jumping for joy. And soon a great king came out of the palace, and he took her in his arms, and he said, "My wife, you have returned. It is good to see you." And they went in the palace, and they put a great robe on her shoulders and a crown on her head, and there was feasting and dancing, and our shepherd was amazed at what was going on. And soon she was holding a little toddler in her lap. And the toddler was playing with the ring she gave him. And then he dropped it, and it fell on the floor and rolled under the table. And our shepherd said, "Well, that's a golden ring. And I'm in a magical place, so I'm going to pick it up and keep it." So he did. And he noticed while all the feasting and dancing was going on, there was one old lady in the corner who was just sitting there glowering at the king, glowering at Hilda. And he didn't know what was going on, but obviously this old lady didn't like it. And finally, the feasting was over, the dancing was over. The king took Hilda down off the chair, the great chair where he was sitting, and he said, "You must stay." She says, "You know I cannot. You know I cannot. For if I stay, great, awful things will happen." He says, "I don't care, you must." She says, "No, I will go back." Well, our shepherd realized he better be back where she left her before she got there. So he ran off, climbed up through the fissure, put the bridle back on, and stood there quietly, having taken the invisible stone out of his pocket, so he was visible now. And she came back, and she climbed up on his shoulders and rode him back to the farm, put him in the bed, and tucked him up in the sheets, and the blankets, and took the bridle out of his mouth. And everybody went to sleep. The next morning, the farmer, who had come back from Christmas Eve services, with great dread, went down to the shepherd's room, fearing what he would find. But he found the shepherd sound asleep, very much seemingly normal. He shook him gently, and the shepherd woke up. He said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Oh, I'm fine." He said, "I had an odd dream, but I'm fine." And the farmer was amazed that he hadn't been affected by whatever the curse was. The farmer said, "Well, you must come out and tell the whole family your dream." So he did. He said, he related what happened. And he looked at Hilda and he said, "And you know that it's true. It wasn't just a dream." She said, "Well, I can't say anything unless you can prove you were there." He brought forth the golden ring and he said, "This is your ring." Her head bowed down. She said, "Yes, you're right. It is my ring. Thank you for bringing it here, for you have broken the curse." The old lady you saw at the palace was the king's mother, and she did not approve of the king marrying me. So she put a curse upon me to live in your world all year round except at Yule, when I could return to the elf kingdom for one night, and then I must return here. And part of the curse was that whoever I used as a horse to get to the place where the palace is, would become insane. And soon, probably, the people would start figuring it out and accuse me of being a witch, and I would be killed. But now you have broken the curse, and I can return to my home, return to my husband, return to my children, and all the shepherds who were previously affected will be cured. So thank you for bringing this ring back with you." And she turned and she walked out of the farm, and they watched as a great fissure opened in the earth, and she walked down in it. And it said, if you listen carefully, you could hear music and cheering as she walked down and the fissure closed up. And she was never seen again on this earth.